Hello? That works. I don't think it works. Mama. Hello?
Haribol. Hare Krishna. It's really soft. Maybe it just needs to be turned up. Haribol, Haribol. Haribol, Haribol. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Haribol, Haribol. Okay, that's okay. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namo Vishnu. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Bhagavad-gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're going to read from Bhagavad-gita 3, chapter 3, text number, and we'll just find it. It was a verse we talked about 2 weeks ago, and it was the verse that said, is it 35? Yes, 35. So we were going to talk about this last week, and most of you weren't here last week because I think there was kirtan in the Byron Bay. So last week we did an interesting thing. You were here for a bit of it, a little bit last week. We did an interesting thing, which was to look at just the verses, and we'll just quickly go over that today. We're not going to spend too much time on that because we want to focus on this verse, but it's interesting and I think important to understand what is the question that Arjuna is asking in this third chapter. So if we can just turn back to page 139, because the framing of this question has a lot to do with the answer, obviously. When we try to understand the answer, we have to understand what is the question. What's Arjuna confused about? What is he trying to understand here? So basically, the second chapter is called Contents of the Gita Summarized. And of course, as it says, it does summarize a lot of the Gita, but it especially focuses on the sort of ABCs of spiritual life, or the foundations of spiritual life, which is that we are not this body, we are not, any particular tribe or nation or gender or, color of a skin or race or age, We're not any of these things. All of these things are external, and the identity of our consciousness is something that is beyond all of these things. So we know we're having an experience. My computer is very smart. It can do so many things, but no one of it would say that my computer is having an experience. It is crunching numbers, certain things in, certain things out. But that computer is not experiencing something. Now, all of us here are having an experience. We're experiencing something. So there's something beyond just our mind, which is like a computer. There's something beyond our body, obviously, that is actually having the experience of being in this mind and this body. And this is what the second chapter of Gita is pointing to and bringing out and asking Arjuna to focus on that. So essentially Krishna says this way and that way, you're not this body, Arjuna. You're not this mind. You are the soul. And therefore all of these considerations of the body, like these are my relatives, I won't enjoy if I kill all my relatives. How will I show off my new house to my relatives if they're all dead? And what to speak of them all being dead, like I'm the guy that killed them. Like, I don't think this is going to be great for my, future material life, etc., etc., etc. But Krishna says, don't worry about all that. You're the soul. Act on the duty of the soul. He says, I'm as the Lord. I'm saying this is what I want you to do with your soul, and you should do that beyond all of these things. So then we come to the third chapter, and Arjuna says, on page 139 of our edition here, Arjuna says, O Janardhan, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? In other words, if you think that this idea of understanding that you're not this body, that you're the soul, this idea of intelligence is higher than just acting on the platform of that I am this body. If you think that that's better, that intelligence, that understanding of you're not this body, then why are then you telling me to act with this body? Why are you telling me to fight in this war? He says, text 2, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively what will be the most beneficial for me. Okay, so this is the context of this third chapter. So Krishna then talks all about action. What's the first thing? What's the first thing he says? We're ultimately going to end up on page, what is it? Text 35, 170, 171. But we're just on page 141 at the moment. We're just on the beginning of the third chapter. So the first thing Krishna says to him is that I've already explained to you that there's two types of people that try to realize this soul. Some try to understand it by empirical philosophical means, others by devotional service. But you should understand that not by just stopping work can you stop your karma. Your karma is going to come. And not by just renouncing everything you can attain to perfect spiritual knowledge. You still have all of this karma, all this work, these reactions that have come to you, and you still have this material conceptions that you are this body. You've been trying for thousands of lifetimes to enjoy identifying with this body, right? So he says you can't just stop. That's not going to help. Okay, so we'll go forward. And he says, in text 5 again, he says, everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities. You can't, there's no question of doing nothing. In other words, you're a conditioned soul. You're conditioned and you will act within that nature that you've created. So within the context of all of that, and we went through a lot of verses last week. It was really nice just to read the verses and really get the flow of the conversation. So I encourage you to do that in your own time, just to read just the verses, also read the purports as well, but sometimes to just read the verse and you get the flow of this conversation. But we come here to the 35th verse, and Krishna is saying here, amongst many other instructions, basically all on the same point of action in Krishna consciousness, karma yoga, he says this word. So we'll say the Sanskrit to this one. Page 171. Shreyan Swadharma Viguna Paradharmat Svanushtitat Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Svanushtitat Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Somebody else? Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Svanushtitat Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Somebody want to chant? Shreya Swadharma Viguna Paradharmat Svanushtitat Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Svanushtitat Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Shreyan, far better. Swadharma, one's prescribed duties. Viguna, even faulty. Paradharmat, then duties mentioned for others. Su anustitat, perfectly done. Swadharme, in one's prescribed duties. Nidhanam, destruction. Shreya, better. Paradharma, duties prescribed for others. Bhaya avaha, dangerous. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Do we have another microphone? Yeah. So we can all read a little bit of this purport. I'll start off, and there's a bit here. We can each just read 3 or 4 lines, okay? One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness, rather than those prescribed for others. Materially, prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition under the spell of the modes of material nature. Somebody else? Take the microphone, yeah.
Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer.
When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation and should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Sastriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for Sastriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principles of non-violence.
Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmana, or a Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya.
In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishvamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmana, whereas Parasamrama was a Brahmana, but later on he acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendentally situated, they could do so, but as long as one on the immaterial platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness.
Okay, so two situations Prabhupada's describing in the purport here. One is where the person or the performer is conditioned, and the other where the performer is liberated. And Prabhupada makes it clear that this instruction is given here for those who are still conditioned. Better to do your own duties. But when you're liberated, then you can do any duty, because the duty is to God, to Krishna. And it doesn't matter what the external designation is. But when you're conditioned, you have to follow the particular duties that you have. One simple example could be if you're working in a factory. Sometimes you watch these how it's made videos, and Govinda likes them, about how pencils are made or something, and it shows the factory how they take the wood and then they cut it, and then he can probably explain it better than me, but they make a little hexagonal shape, and then they drill a hole through the middle, don't they? And then they push the lead in, and then they cut. Anyway, there's a whole process of making a pencil. So just say if you're working in that factory, and it's more like people doing it, like in the old days, rather than machines, and maybe you're doing a certain thing on the production line, like you have to put the initial coat, the undercoat on the pencil, for example, and then the next guy, he's putting the paint, and then the next one's writing the little, what's it called, the logo or whatever, the company name or whatever, right? So you're sitting there like that. So you might see that guy there is writing the company name, he's not writing it very neatly, right? But if you think, oh, I can do that better, I'll write the company name here instead of putting the undercoat on, the next guy along the line is just going to cover that with the next thing of paint. Like, that's not your duty, that's not what meant you're doing in the whole production line. So it's a simple example, but when we're conditioned, we have a certain nature, we're meant to a certain thing. Krishna is saying in the context of this, of this chapter, that it's better to do that, even if it's not done perfectly. than to try to do someone else's duty perfectly. And this is what we, the importance of when we're trying to understand, like this whole class came out of that a couple of weeks ago, we're trying to understand this verse. We have to really understand the context and what's being said and what does he mean, in what context is he saying that. And there's many things like that, but that's just life, right? And it's not just scripture. Like scripture is meant to represent, or it does represent, the real world. So if the real world is incredibly complex, and what we do depends on the context. You can't drive more than 100 kilometers an hour. That's the rule. But then if we're taking someone to hospital who's dying, we drive at 120 k's, then the police will say, "Oh, of course, go. I'll help you. I'll give you an escort." So like that, the scriptures are also, we always have to be careful not to just sort of, fanatically or blindly apply it in every circumstance, especially in the beginning. Especially in the beginning, we can't say, "Oh, Krishna says I have to do my own duty, even if it's faultily, that's better than death," or something, and then apply that to something where, our ashram leader or someone's telling us, "Oh, we really need you to go into town and buy some milk," and so, "I'm not a Vaishya, I'm a Brahmana, I can only give class," or something like that. So I'm making an extreme example, but we really have to see. I think Govinda Charan talks about there's the point, and then there's the point of the point. Right? What's the point? Why is he saying this? He's saying this in this context of karma yoga. And essentially, what's the question that he's answering? What's the real, in this verse? What's the part of what's Arjuna's argument that he's really answering here? Does anyone know? There's a bunch of questions that Arjuna sort of uses as an argument. This is why I shouldn't fight. What's the one that he's really addressing here? Yeah? Anyone? Yep. Can you use the mic in case everybody's listening online, they can hear as well?
I think I'm following along, but Haribol.
Haribol. Just push the button. Is it turned on? No, it's still not turned on. Just hold the button in for a second. That's it. Perfect.
So I think he's asking the question because if he knows what is the morally right thing to do, why would Krishna ask him to fulfill this duty that he feels is going against the scripture or the Vedic texts, right? Like
that he feels is what? Sorry, what was the last one?
That he feels like is going against the Vedic text.
Oh wow, thank you.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. He's going against what he thinks is morally right. What's the right thing to do? Yeah, definitely. Yep. That's overall the whole thing. Definitely, that's what he's saying. This is the right thing. But what does he say? More or less, he says to Krishna that I might as well just do this then. Yeah. And what does he mean by being a beggar? Living at the cost of exactly. Yeah. He says better to become a renunciate than to do that, and Krishna is directly addressing that here, isn't he? By saying no, even if you think it's improper to go on the battlefield and do what you're doing, still your duty as a Kshatriya, that's your role in the society. Even if you think that's wrong, that's better than artificially saying, "Oh, I think I'll be a Brahmana." And Prabhupada brings that out in the purport, doesn't he? Because he gives that exact example, or he says, for a Brahmana, non-violence is good. Right? Brahmanas are meant to, like teachers, they're meant to be not violent to people. They're meant to be giving to everyone. Anybody that comes to learn, they teach them. You want to learn whatever the subject is, you come. You know, you go to university, you don't expect that the teacher is going to be violent in a sense of, you know, even in a subtle sense of distinguishing between the students. Oh, I like you. You're from my kind of group and my social section. I don't like you. I think I'm going to fail you. Or you, I'm going to give. But it doesn't matter what your exam is. You, I'm going to give top marks. If a teacher does something like that, right? It's not teaching. It's not. A Brahmana has to be non-violent in a subtle sense. He's giving knowledge to everyone. He's not giving preferential treatment or trying to conquer some people or whatever. That's the Kshatriya's business. The administrators, they have to do that. So if a Kshatriya is doing his duty and at a certain point it comes something that he doesn't like to do, okay, it's time for the fight to see who's really empowered by God here, us or you. All right, let's go and figure it out. Step outside, buddy. And in the Vedic times, they did step outside. They went to a big field, right? They went to the battle of Kurukshetra, away from all the towns, away from all the villages. And there were no, what do they call it? What's the terrible term? Yes, thank you. Civilians. But what do they call civilian casualties? Even that is a language of unconsciousness. But what do they call collateral damage? Thank you. Collateral damage. Oh, there was collateral damage. AKA, you know, thousands of families, women with breastfeeding babies and little children were slaughtered. That's how warfare is conducted nowadays, right? But in that time it wasn't like that. The king was like, I have the potency of God to manage and rule and protect everyone. And the other party's like, oh, you think you do? No, I do. I said, oh, okay, well, let's see. Who's got the most potency of protection of power? And they'd sort it out. And as Krishna says to him, that if you lose, you go to heaven, you go to a high destination. Is basically essentially your sacrifice as a Kshatriya. You're sacrificing your body. And he says these Kshatriyas are happy to see a just fight. Oh, great, because either I'll win or I'll leave this body and I'll go to a much better place because I've done that dharmic sacrifice. So if you do that, you know, instead of doing that, Krishna is saying, you say, oh, actually I'm going to be a Brahmana now. Brahmanas don't fight. No, it doesn't work like that. It'd be like a Brahmana saying, yeah, I'm equal to everyone, I'm giving everyone knowledge, and then at one point it's saying, you know, okay, I don't like you guys, I want you to be in my kingdom or what. That whole political intrigue element of society, it'd be just as silly as that. So this is the particular justification that, you know, Krishna is addressing here. And that's why if we understand the context and understand exactly what Krishna is addressing, what point he's addressing, then we can apply the philosophy to that particular point, and we don't apply it to something else in some other place, which is not what he's meaning. Although his words are absolute, he's the Lord, so his words are always true, but they're also contextualized in a certain context for us. We have a certain life. All right. I'm going to ask you guys for some input now. How do you see that you can apply this practically in your daily life, in your service? This point that Krishna is saying that, you know, you should try to do the service you've done. And secondary, if you want to have any comment or thought about the second part of the purport, where Prabhupada says, when you are liberated, then you can do any duties. Maybe we should talk about that for a minute, because that's very relevant to us, right? Are we liberated yet? I don't know, maybe some of you are, but I definitely know I'm not. So we're not in that category. But how do we act on the platform of liberation? How can we practically act on the platform of liberation? If we act under the direction of a liberated person, Prabhupada explains that, then that action under that direction is liberated. Right? It's a subtle point. We are not liberated, we have the propensity, if we didn't have anybody telling us anything and we just simply followed the desires of our mind, I'll give you a quarter of a second to meditate on that. Stop. Don't meditate on that anymore. Sorry, joke. But just imagine all the desire, there'd just be chaos, right? We would not be on the liberated platform. But why, to the extent that we follow, the liberated soul tells us, don't do these 4 sinful activities. Chant Hare Krishna. Perform this, do these activities. Try to serve others in Krishna. Try to give God consciousness to others. Those actions we perform, they're on the liberated platform. We're not liberated, but those actions are. Does that make sense? Because they're beyond our natural mind, and they're not beyond our conditioned mind. They're beyond our conditioned mind. Our conditioned mind is telling us, okay, after prasadam, catch an Uber to the Gold Coast, into the nightclub, let's go. I'm just being totally silly. I'm sure none of your conditioned mind is telling you that. But whatever it is, when we follow the instruction of a liberated soul, even though we're not liberated, then our activities are on that liberated platform. They're not implicated in the modes of nature anymore. He's telling us, don't go to the nightclub, don't take intoxication, eat meat, gamble, illicit sex, chant Hare Krishna, live in this way. And we live in that way, those activities are in liberation. So in that sense, and Prabhupada talks a lot about that in a sense of being a guru. Now, in one sense, being a guru, like a Diksha guru, is a very exalted post. It's a very, only devotees who are really advanced through the whole lifetime of practicing and previous lives can take that goal. But in another sense, Prabhupada says, sometimes he says, it's also very simple. It's simply repeating what you've heard from the liberated spiritual master. The liberated spiritual master says, no meat, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. Chant Hare Krishna, 16 rounds. Don't offend devotees. Try to serve devotees. Try to be kind to all living entities. You do these things, then the message is pure, right? Prabhupada says, it's that simple, right? Krishna says, surrender to me. And if we say, surrender to Krishna, that message is pure, isn't it? Now, I may not be pure. I definitely am not pure, right? But that message is pure, right? Subtle point. But if we understand this, we can also understand how our activities fit into the second part of that purport, where Prabhupada's saying that those who are liberated, he gives the example of Vishvamitra Muni, who was a Brahmana, but who was a Kshatriya but acted as a Brahmana, and Parashuram, who was a Brahmana but acted as a Kshatriya. They're the examples, but we can also see, how does that relate to us? That how can we perform different duties if we are acting on that platform of liberation, aka under the direction of a liberated person? So that's the 2 questions for, or the 2 topics for, thinking about. Just take a minute to think about. The first one is how you would apply this verse in your own life, how and in what circumstances it is important to important to do our own duties and not another's duties. And then in what circumstance, or how do we see the application of this second part of the purport, where Prabhupada says, actually, when you're liberated, or on the liberated platform, the Krishna conscious platform, you can do any duty. You can do any duty under the direction of your authorities. Does anybody like to start? Any comments or just any thoughts about this verse? Yep. Yeah.
Haribol, thank you. The first thing that about the second part of that is that I feel it or see it more here with the senior devotees, and how they'll just take any call to action, and it doesn't. Like,
What's an example of where you've seen that somebody taking a call to action and just
covering a service that's been needed, or like just showing up no matter what, and like whereas like for me, starting out my journey, I see a lot more effect of like, oh, I don't want to do it, or affected by the mind, or this and that. Whereas there's others.
Super nice.
Yeah.
Super nice, yeah. We can see that, isn't it? And even they may not be completely pure, but we can say, oh, they're a bit along the path than what I am. Because I'm sort of thinking, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and that's enough. Oh, I can't do any more today. That's it. And someone says, you say, no, I can't. It's too much.
Yeah.
But we see these devotees who are just always doing service. And then, I mean, there was an example for me on cooking Prabhupada's feast, when we put a thing on the chat for anyone to come and help roll the kachoris. And Vishnu Jampuru came and just started rolling kachoris. And like, he's like the busiest person. He's all over the Didi roster. Yeah. He goes on Harinam twice a week at least. He's serving Mukunda Maharaj all the time. He's doing everything. And then he said, I think his comment, when I said, oh, thanks for coming, he said, oh, yeah, I only just saw the message. He came like half an hour later and said, oh, yeah, I just saw the message. And he literally exactly what he said. He was here within like a minute. Yeah. So, and that's such a nice point. Thank you. Yeah, because he's always serving. So it doesn't matter. I'm always serving. Yeah, serving. I'll serve it. I'll serve there. Yeah, it's just. And that's practical liberation in bhakti. Yeah. Right? You see it. It's like. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Is that all? Yeah, that's an awesome point. We see it with the senior devotees who. They're not, their mind, like you said, the mind is not getting in the way.
Yeah, and they just get that supernatural power, like that Krishna power in a way. I think of Vasu, like going to Harinam every week. And like, it's a big night, and he just goes every week, and then we're like, oh.
Garuda is an amazing example of that. Garuda, oh my God. I was joking with him one time, he's just going to be standing there stirring the pot, and then all of a sudden, something's going to happen, and he's there stirring the pot in his, eternal form in the spiritual world. It's just going to keep going. He's saying, oh, Krishna, right? Oh, that's it. Oh, the cowboys there. Just kept stirring the pot, just.
And then just something that's just come through, and I don't know if it's a question or more of a statement, is it in the beginning, like especially while we're here and doing a lot of service, is it better to find your kind of your place in your service, or what am I saying, like your duty, and do that to begin with to kind of keep that engagement going, because we're not at that state where we can like happily do everything all the time.
Is it better to what do you mean exactly by that? Like to find our own place?
Like, because there's obviously services that you like more than the others, and that you're more suited to than the others. But then you kind of get put in a bit of everything. Yeah.
It generally, like, as we go along, we just sort of specialize more and more. I mean, it's kind of a universal principle, I think. Like, I studied at uni science, and the first year, I think there was biochemistry, pharmacology, and anatomy maybe, and what's that other one? Anyway, whatever those, it's generally science, the sort of biological science. And then in the first year, then I did pretty well at biochemistry, so they said, oh, you can do, so then second year it was like all biochemistry subjects. And then third years. So like, then it was more specialized. Then if I'd have gone on to do a master's, as my lecturer told me that I must do, or I'd be in the gutter, unemployed. When I told him that after uni, that was it. I was out of there. I was going to try and find the meaning of life. He didn't like that much. Yeah, so, if I'd gone to master's, then it would have been, okay, within biochemistry, what are you going to do? Immunology, or are you going to do cancer research, oncology, and then, so similarly, I think when we come into devotional service, we just kind of boot camp, whatever, we just do whatever, and, it doesn't really matter. But pretty soon, and it's sort of an interplay, I think, between our abilities which is hopefully linked and generally linked to what we like to do, generally what we're good at, we like to do, that sort of combined, and then what's needed, and our, the people looking after us, authorities or whatever you call the people looking after us, they know sort of what's needed, and then they can they see our abilities and stuff, and that's like that. I think I pretty much just did whatever for about 2 years, more or less, in the ashram. And then I think in the 3rd year, Ajita went to America to see his Guru Maharaj, and there was a big Rath Yatra organised in Brisbane. And so I don't know why, but he just told me to organise this. So I organised this whole Rath Yatra, and it was like organising all the swamis and everyone. And it was a nighttime one, so let's put lights on the cart and do all this whole thing. And it was funded by the council. They gave like $10,000, I can't remember. Seemed like a lot of money at the time. And then it rained and the whole thing was cancelled. So we had to unpack everything, take it. And then the next week they did it again. They refunded it to this, and then they did again. So I did all that. So after I did all that, I remember I was cooking the Sunday feast, and then the devotee who was organising like home visits and kind of like fundraising and different things, he said, you got a bit of, ability to organise things, so why don't you come and do this? So then I kind of did that. So I guess looking back, like if we can see that we're competent at something, it may not be management, it may be cooking, or it may be explaining the philosophy, or maybe the arts, maybe then those people will see that, we can do that. But I mean, I didn't try, it just kind of happened. And then after, I think a year after that, I was telling my temple president there was this philosophy that was like pretty wacko as far as I could see, and I was explaining to him why. I said, this doesn't make any sense. Shastra says this and that. And he says, you understand that, why don't you write something about it? So I did, and then from that became like, I got involved in all this philosophical writing and different things. So like, yeah, it just sort of happens, but you have to be inspired to do something, and your authorities will see, you can do something. But that was after like 2 or 3 years full-time in the ashram, turning 16 rounds every day, come to the program. Not that it has to take that long, but like in the beginning, we're just sort of just trying to follow the general program, and then once we've got that, then it's like, okay, what is manifesting? Like what of our nature can Krishna use more specifically? Like teaching or managing or business or artistry, those 4 general things. Like that. Yes. There's no band practice tonight, Govinda. Sorry, I just have to tell him. I just had to tell him. Please go on. Sorry.
Do you think, like, with the purport, how there's like 2 parts to it? The first kind of acknowledging how we're conditioned souls who will act within our nature, and then it comes to coming into devotional service.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
There's 2 distinct parts, isn't there?
Yeah.
The sort of the conditioned part and the liberated part. Yeah.
Do you feel... Because something I've heard quite a lot since being here is...
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare.
What's that? Haven't heard that one before. I'm joking.
Really?
Your intelligence gets refined through devotional service and taking to the process. Your intelligence gets refined, and it's not so much that you perhaps discard your conditioning so much, so maybe perhaps more you're able to work within your nature, but just with a higher intelligence, so you can go about it in a elevated way, rather than just acting within your nature just unconsciously, like an animal. And through the process, this is what I've heard, through the process of devotional service and chanting and reading and association and all of that, you're sharpening your intelligence to then act in the world because you have to act. You can't just not.
Mm.
But you're doing it with a more refined, direct, clear, concise way.
Mm.
Yeah, that's just a point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, 100%. And Krishna says one verse where he says that you have to steady the mind. So the mind means the mind and the emotions. Manas means the mind and the desires, doing this, all that whole arena of emotions and mind. Krishna says you have to steady that with deliberate spiritual intelligence. Exactly what you're just saying. So rather than acting according to the dictates of the lower nature, you come to a platform where you can steady the mind, the intelligence, and you can say, all right, how can I use that in Krishna service? Rupa Goswami gives that verse where this is a high level of renunciation, to use your nature, where devotees will use their nature like Hanuman fought for Lord Ram. He used his nature as a strong person. He fought for Lord Ram. To use your nature for Krishna is a higher level of renunciation than just not doing anything and saying, I renounce all these qualities that I have. But what are you renouncing? What does Krishna say? I am the strength of the strong. I am the ability in the human being. Krishna says, so you're renouncing that. That's God's qualities that you're renouncing, saying, no, I don't want part of that. So Rupa Goswami says, higher is to say these are the quality, these are God's qualities. These are coming from the source, coming divine, and I've got them. How do I offer them back to the source? Those qualities. And that's a higher level. It's like once I asked Ajita if I think I was doing an astrology reading for someone, and they had in their chart a combination about operating heavy machinery, and I just made a comment to the Ajita that he could use the digger or something, and I mentioned his digger, the big blue one, I think, and he said, I wouldn't trust that to someone that sort of inexperienced or whatever. So in a sense, using our God-given abilities and strengths is a real, it's something of great responsibility. Like the ability to influence others, for example. Say somebody can speak really nicely and everyone's like, wow. Like that can easily be used for their own selfish and to make them famous and whatever. Or, physical strength or beauty to attract people. I can attract people, whatever. Okay, to your materialistic ends. So in a sense, it is definitely a higher level, and it requires to be able to use intelligence to use these God-given gifts that we have in the service of God, rather than just to say, oh no, I'm nothing, I can't do anything, I can just sweep the floor and I can't really engage my emotion in anything, I'm too fallen or whatever, like on that sort of level. But those great devotees like Hanuman, Arjuna, they're like out there. Prabhupada talks about this, Arjuna wasn't, sometimes they say, Arjuna wasn't chanting japa on the battlefield. He was like, we have to chant japa, that's where we're at. But he's just making the point that whatever he had, he was using that for Krishna consciousness. So that is the higher level, and that is, I would personally agree, and I think that is our philosophy, that as we progress, I would say in a sense our intelligence maybe, I wouldn't say becomes sharpened, but I would say in a sense, if we look at it philosophically, it becomes separated from the mind. And when we're very conditioned, our mind and intelligence are just. There's that example of the cart, right? The 4 horses are the senses, the driving instrument, the reins are the intelligence, right? The driver is the. Sorry. The reins are like the mind. The driver is the intelligence. And the soul is just sitting there getting carried away. So when our mind is all over the place, those things, then the horses are just running wild. If the horses are in control, in other words, if the senses are in control, the mind is slave to the senses, the intelligence is slave to the mind. The mind is just telling the intelligence that it wants to achieve certain things. You've go and figure out how to get it done. The intelligence is like, yes, sir, like that. So that's the wrong way around. So not only separated, but it becomes that the intelligence is put in its proper position, which is above the mind. It's more subtle. You know that verse: earth, water, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. The intelligence is above, and that's what Krishna says. You have to steady the mind with the intelligence. And so, in a sense, you could say sharpen the intelligence. In another sense, you could say discriminating. Separating the function of discrimination becomes independent of the emotions, becomes independent of, and the emotions are taken care of. The intelligence, like, it's okay, emotions, you'll get what you need, it's okay. But it's not that the intelligence is just slave to the mind and the emotions. I want this, all right, quick, go and get an ice cream immediately, or whatever it is. So, yeah, agreed. I'm working on short answers. It's my weakness.
I was wondering if it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties even though faultily than another's perfectly. Is that maybe also a little bit of stay in your own lane type of comment? Like, don't worry about what other people are... Maybe just focus on your own path and what you're meant to be doing and not worrying about what other people are doing?
Yeah,
just wondering
definitely.
if that's maybe a little bit...
Yeah, I mean, that's the essence of what he's saying, that you've committed to being a kshatriya, to take that role in society. That's your lane, that's what you're doing. Even if you think there's some duty in it, still, you should follow that. You shouldn't just suddenly jump to another lane and say, oh, I'm going to go and do something else. So yeah, I think it's very, very close. That is what is being said. You could say it in that way, stay in your lane. Kind of better to do that. Even if there's some problems in your work, then... we have to realize too, it was a very different society back then. Like I was saying today in these seminars I was giving, that when I was 10 years old, so in the late 70s, in Brisbane we lived, and we used to put the milk bottles out at night time, and we'd put the money with it, and then that was at 6 o'clock at night, and then the next morning early the milker would come, take the bottles, take the money, and put the fresh milk there. So it was, I remember, 4 or 6 bottles of milk. So it'd have to be, say, $10, $15 in our current, time of money. And say in the street there was 40 houses. So what's that? $400 was just sitting outside everybody's house. The money was just sitting there, but no one ever thought to take it. That was just the world we lived in. So how much has changed just in 40 years? So imagine, see those pictures of India before the British came. Oh, it's not before. So when the British came, there's beautiful drawings you can see of Jagannath Puri Rath Yatra and so many temples and so many things. There's no cars, there's no plastic bags, there's nothing. It's just pristine, beautiful. The temple, everything. It's just amazing. And that was only 150 years ago. Now go pre-industrial, where there were no machines. Go pre-electricity and all that. As soon as it was dark, that was it. It was dark. Everyone would just shut down and stop. Sun would come up there. Everyone was super in touch with the luminaries, the cycles of the sun and the moon and everything. So it's very hard for us, I would submit that it's almost impossible for us to really understand what a society was like that is being described here. This is 5,000 years ago. In schools they study ancient histories, anything before the birth of Christ, anything before 2,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago, it's just bits of pottery and digs. There's not that much known, except we can read about it. But the society was so clear. This is my duty, this is what I do in society. So of course we have to translate that into our world. We may say, I might do a job for a while and then realize, this job isn't for me. Even in our lifetime, it was common for people to have one career and go through the whole life with the same career. It's almost unheard of now for people to do that. Again, the context, that in this context, it's like your duty, you should stick to that. But we can translate that into our context. Yeah, stay in your lane. Do your thing. Do what you're doing. and follow that through as best you can. That makes sense. Was someone else going to say something? Yep. We've probably got another 5-10 minutes.
So just going back to your questions.
Yep.
So I've been thinking about this a little bit, like how do I make these duties, or how do I even discern what my duties are in any given moment, and what does it mean to fulfill them in the service for Krishna rather than as fruitive activities? And I think just even asking the question has really helped me on my journey, like when it feels like in moments that I'm not fulfilling any sort of meaningful duty, I try to think of how does this lead to me fulfilling what I believe to be my duty in service to Krishna, and it helps me kind of like even see the mundane activities as being like this part of the process that I have to go through in order to fill that prescribed duty. And kind of switching this mentality has really helped me feel like there's a fulfilling happening, so I don't feel so lost, even in those really more tamasic moments, I guess.
Yeah, very good. And that's exactly as you said, like just the thinking about it is the success. Like that time that the devotee read the letter to Prabhupada about another devotee who was having so many problems following the regulated principles, and he'd stop and then he'd try again and then he couldn't and then he'd try again. And the devotee was thinking that, oh, it's a failure, it's disconnected. But Prabhupada saw, no, the trying, just see how he's trying. So that trying, that is bhakti. Bhakti is that trying to serve Krishna separate from just trying to either enjoy the world or to get out of the world. That's the definition of bhakti. So the bhakti is what you just said, is that thought process. And it's not an artificial, it's not just thinking, yeah, I'm serving Krishna. Of course, we can see it translates to the external, and other people, other devotees can confirm, yes, you are serving. So it's not just an imagination, but still, ultimately, it's a personal thing that the bhakti is that we have that desire to serve God, to serve Krishna, to please the source of all this, not to take it for ourselves or not to just get ourselves out of it so we can be free from it, but to actually lovingly engage in the service of the Supreme. So, like you said, that connection, even when we're not doing it, then we're thinking, oh, how can I do it? Or how is this leading to doing it? I'm standing at Coles and the machine doesn't take my card again, and it's really frustrating or whatever. I said, no, that's okay. I've been told to get some rice, whatever, for the temple, and I'm doing that. There's these mundane things along the way, but ultimately, where the ultimate goal. There's a nice verse in Bhagavad-gita. I'll just quickly say that says, "Etavan sankyoga bhyam svadharma parinishtaya janmalava parapumsam ante narayana smriti." That the perfection of all kinds of yogas, all kinds of activities, everything that we do. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Abhyan, Sankhya Yoga, trying to understand the world. Svadharma, your own dharma, what we're talking about today, your activities. Parinishtaya, Janma Lava, your birth, the goal, the lava, the final goal, the Janma Lava Para, the supreme pumsam of a person. Ante Narayana Smriti, Ante at the end, Narayan, Krishna, Narayan, Smriti, remembering. So it says that the ultimate goal of all of these things is what? Is to be leaving a body, meditating and remembering Krishna. That's the goal. So like you practice during this life, you're remembering Krishna. Oh, I'm not doing directly, but this is for Krishna ultimately. And on how can I get this back to actually, even I'm bitten tamas, or I woke up late or whatever's going on. Okay, how can I get it back to? And if we do that during the life, then it's very easy to remember Krishna at the time of death, which is the ultimate goal. You were going to say something else?
Yeah, I think it's in relation to the second half of the question of like switching when you're in the spiritual world or the spiritual platform. You're switching between duties, and that's okay. And I feel like I really appreciate the village as being like that kind of spiritual platform in which I can feel like I can fulfill my duty as, say, just working in a garden, and then switching into cleaning the temple or cooking food. And I can see that as that being like this, my duties are changing in different circumstances, and that's me transitioning between those different duties. But I think my problem is like understanding, like, or really defining or discerning what are those real important duties that I must be upholding. Like, you know, I think it's really clear in the Gita. It's like you're a kshatriya or a brahmin, but like for me in this day and age, I'm like, I don't know if I'm any of those things.
So Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes a very clear distinction between temporary duties and eternal duties. And in a sense, that's another way we could divvy up this purport. The first part of the purport is all about temporary duties. In other words, what are the duties of your body and your mind? You have particular nature, you're of a certain varna, that's it. The eternal duties are what are the duties of your soul. And this is what Bhagavatam is telling us, and Bhagavad-gita comes to at the end. So the essential point is that whatever the temporary duties are, we have to always try to move towards the eternal duties. So if we're working the garden one day or we're doing something else another day, you know, that can change, whatever, but the eternal duties have to stay the same, and they should increase. So we're chanting 1 round a day, and we're, you know, doing whatever, we're reading 1 page of Gita or something. Okay, let's try to chant 2 rounds a day. All right, let's read 3 pages of Gita and, you know, listen to 1 lecture every day or something like that. Like, they're the eternal duties, the direct hearing about Krishna, chanting Krishna's name, remembering Krishna. These are the eternal, they're the duties of the soul. So you'll see as you go along, and I think this is related to the question or the comment originally about how more senior devotees, they can easily do anything. One of the reasons is because they're not doing those temporary duties, they're not identifying as, it doesn't matter to them, because the the soul duties are so strong. They're serving Krishna. You know, Krishna, I want to serve you. And Krishna says, I need some help rolling some guitars. Okay, let's do it. But in his head, in his heart, he's thinking, I'm serving Krishna. That's what's actually going on. Just outside, the hands are doing this, they're in the garden, or they're there. But that takes time to develop, and therefore we have to focus on that, those eternal duties, which are the second half of this purport. In other words, they're independent of the body and the mind, to do with the soul. Interestingly, the very first instruction of Srimad Bhagavatam, you know, there's 18,000 verses over there. But the first instruction, you know, the first chapter just sets the scene. And then the sages in Naimisharanya are asking, and then finally Sutta Goswami says, you know, these are great questions and whatever. And the first thing he says, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti adhokshade ahituki apratiyata yai atma suprasidati. He says, the supreme occupation for all people is that which you can attain service to the Supreme Soul. Savai pumsam paro dharmo, the paradharma. You know, what's your ultimate duty? Save pumsam parodamo yato bhakti adhokshade. That which you can get bhakti, or devotion, you know, serving in devotion the God, the Supreme Lord. Ahituke without stopping and without any other cause. Yaya atma suprasidati. Your soul itself will actually become completely happy and satisfied. So essentially the Bhagavatam is right there in that 1 verse. Everything else is expanding on that. So that's what we have to see. That's the core of it. That's the core of it, developing bhakti. And that directly comes from, you know, chanting, hearing about Krishna, associating with devotees, those things. And the other things are just, how do we live in this world so that our mind and body is, you know, satisfied? If we try to be renounced and just eat 1 grain of rice every day, and, you know, we can't do it. We'll flip out and end up going and getting a job at Kmart and whatever. You know, it's not going to happen. So whatever the body and mind needs to be peaceful, that much we do. Figure out what's our duties, whatever that. But that's for a devotee, that's always kind of secondary. It's important because if that's not taken care of, then we can get thrown off the path of the primary, which is the hearing and chanting, you know? So our relationships, our home situation, our ashram, our friends, how we relate to our parents, all these things directly impact how peacefully and focusedly we can chant the holy name and remember Krishna and serve Krishna. So in that way we look at them as important. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hare Krishna. All glory Srila Prabhupada. Haribol. Have a good week. Have a great week. Oh, sorry. Kids leaving their stuff everywhere.